Okay, listen, guys, please take your seats because we have to really go chop, chop, chop. There are so many amazing leaders, so many amazing panelists. We have to really start the conversation. So please let me start with introducing myself. I'm Aleksandra Karasińska. I'm a journalist. I'm a women rights activist, and I'm a director of Ringier Axel Springer Polska Foundation. And the topic of this panel is actually related to the previous panel. We were listening to the very important voices about security, about war, about how to make women safe and include women leaders into the peace process. And now we're talking about disinformation, division, and it's actually very, very much connected. Thank you, Prime Minister.
It's because I opened it, so now I thought I would close it.
You know, this is the leadership thing. You know, she takes actions. So listen, guys. You know, the topic is really close to my heart because as a journalist, I think that reliable news source, objective reporting is actually crucial to our democracy, and that's why it's so important to repeat why we have this crisis, why we have such a polarized politics right now, and it all comes down to technology. So in this era we are facing of rapid technological change, all present disinformation, polarization, and deepening global divisions, we really need resilient, inclusive leadership and women leadership. So let's introduce our esteemed panelists. Helle Thorning Schmidt, former Prime Minister of Denmark and board president of Oversight Board. Hello.
Hello. Very nice to see you all.
And Rupal Hollenbeck, President, Checkpoint Software Technologies. Welcome. Aleksander Kutela, CEO of Ringier Axel Springer Polska Media Group. Hello. And last but not least, Małgorzata Bonikowska, President and CEO of Center of International Studies. Hello, Małgosiu. So let's start with this question to all of you. How do you see the role of women in addressing these challenges I mentioned? Disinformation, division, technological disruption. Can you share like an example from your experience maybe when women's leadership made measurable impact? Helle.
First of all, nice to see you all. I'm sorry I opened the window and that's why I had to close it again. And that's why I'm very happy to be here. This is an important topic. The way I see the world right now is that women's rights are being pushed back everywhere in the world. And that's why it's still important. Some might ask, is it still important to meet in a forum like this? I walked up here before I actually fell right out there and spoke to a few women. And I think we all agree that it is, particularly now, in January 2025, it feels important that women are still meeting and talking about how we can gain more influence in the world. Someone said a couple of weeks ago that the world needs more masculine energy. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that that is what we need now. I think we need feminine energy. And to answer your question, I think we have seen numerous examples of where women leaders have actually been very good at taking the world through different crises. I think of COVID, where we saw some of the female leaders were extremely good at that. That was Chancellor Merkel in Germany, the Danish Prime Minister, a woman, others as well, where you saw that because women have this capacity to not think they know everything, they actually listen to experts, they don't take rash decisions. And some of the leaders back then that didn't do very well were people who had an extreme masculine energy, like Boris Johnson or President Trump. So I do think there are many examples where female leadership matters enormously. And everywhere that I've been, as a leader of the opposition, leader of my party, Prime Minister, I really felt that it is so important now in a boardroom, many boards, that we have that voice of women in the room. And I often, still to this day, am the only woman in a boardroom. So that to me shows me that yes, we can still make a difference. Women come with a different perspective, not because we are better people in any way or anything like that, just because women live very different lives than men do, and that is why we still need women to engage in leadership, and I encourage you all to do so.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Rupal, you've been working all your life in top technological companies, and you represent one. What is your perspective on women leadership in this era of disruption and disinformation?
Well, first I'd like to say +1 to everything that the Prime Minister said. You know, there was an early panelist, and something that is really interesting to me is that these topics are all building on each other. It really doesn't matter the topic that we're speaking about here. The same themes are emerging, right? And so there was a panelist from, the panelist from Poland who said, it's not enough to be in the room. It's not enough to be included in that way. We have to be in positions of authority so that we are making decisions. We're calling the plays. We're not victims of the plays. And so that's something that I'm very passionate about. I come from the corporate world, and I've been in high tech for 30 years. And I'm very proud of the progress we've made, but it's just a drop in the bucket. The area of disinformation is very important to me because I happen to work in cybersecurity. So the best way for women to get involved, is to not only be in the conversation, but to lead the conversation. And I've been very fortunate in my career. I'm currently president at Checkpoint, but what I'm really proud of is we all hear in the corporate world that when women make it to the C-suite, they make it to certain positions that are sort of earmarked for the women. Do you know what I'm talking
Marketing,
about? The chief
HR.
HR officer, the chief marketing officer. Well, let me tell you something. At my company, both of those roles are held by men. And you know the role that the women play? The women play the role of president. The women play the role of chief technology officer. She's sitting right there in the second row. They play the role of our chief product officer and global head of R&D. That is a tremendous source of pride for me, but it's also a frustration. In my boardroom, in the Checkpoint board, 4 women, half women. That is amazing, and I'm so very proud of it. But then I look around, I look up and I look around at the technology industry, and certainly in the cybersecurity industry, and they're not there. We are not there. And so while I feel very proud of what we've been able to accomplish at Checkpoint, it's simply not enough. And we have to propagate this. And I think also in an earlier panel was this discussion about education. I couldn't agree more. I really do believe that education and equality of education access is so critical for this world and for women to find their rightful place in this world. So I'm very passionate about that as well. We at Checkpoint invest a lot in both education and bringing up women in cybersecurity. And so on this topic of disinformation, having the women in our company, including our general counsel, our global vice president of research, all women. And what we have to do now is pay this forward. What we have to do now is propagate this. And I spend a lot of time speaking to companies across technology and also speaking to engineering schools to show people, to show women in particular. They say that if you can't see it, you can't be it.
Exactly.
And so I want them to see me. I want them to see my colleagues. I want them to see all of you so that they can see what's truly possible.
Thank you. You can't see, or you can't be what you can't see. Exactly. Aleksander, you represent media company and huge media business. And as we talk about disinformation and polarization, media play, in my opinion, as a journalist, a crucial role. Tell me, what is your perspective? How can women's voices can be heard and actually enhanced in media sphere?
First of all, I agree with everything was said. I really do. And yes, media, I think, are playing a very important part in the whole thing, because unfortunately disinformation impacts media probably more than any other industry, simply because disinformation declined the trust to social media, and as a result also to media. And the negative impact on that is that people generally start to avoid news, start to avoid all kind of media. And obviously it impacts democracy, it impacts rules of law. And in addition, unfortunately, acceleration of technology doesn't help, at least at that stage, because reinforced stereotypes. Just let me give you a simple example of a test which our colleagues from Ringier ran. They asked one of a AI tool to picture a CEO making a presentation. 100% pictures were men, to your point, yes? 88% white men. When on the other hand, we asked about picture of kindergarten teacher, 100% were women, 88% white women. So unfortunately, we're at the stage where technology not only doesn't help, but in a way reinforce the stereotypes and the risks which we are facing. But it is a double-edged sword, and at the same time, it can help us. And here, the good example of, and fantastic example even of the women leadership comes across. Our CFO, our global CFO, Annabella Basler, initiate Equal Voice Initiative to ensure that in media, men and women voice is equally presented in every piece of content. And here we use technology to build a tool which actually analyzes every piece of content, check using semantic AI analytics whether these voices are equally represented and balanced, suggest changes, how it should be done to avoid any kind of bias. So here we have a perfect example. Thanks to this determination of Annabelle, this tool is used now by our media across 7 countries. More than 50 million people around Europe now use media which basically are checked from that point of view. Yes, so I think that technology could help us to address some of the issues which we discuss, but we really need to be careful and be aware on the risks and opportunities which this technology brings to us.
Thank you, Aleksander. And you know what? This model I add to that. This is just AI language learning model. So if you implement it on your website, it just tells you how percentage of men and women voices in the text or picture or audio. So the journalists know that in the text, for example, there's only 3% of women voices, or like a story about women, or a hero who is speaking, yes? So it's a very easy tool, but it gives enormous impact, and it's a great example. Thank you. Małgorzata, we are talking about disinformation and division, and you're an expert on, global politics. Because we are in Davos, and because we are waiting for the Trump speech tomorrow, what is your stand on disinformation? Is it going to be more difficult to regulate big tech and create safer space, or is it going to be much tougher?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for this opportunity. And I'm so happy that also people from Central Eastern Europe and the eastern flank of European Union are here in Davos. So many of us. First of all, I think the problem with disinformation is really affecting all of us. It's not only the European characteristic. And of course, it's because of the internet, social media, and also because of our habits. I think the key thing why this is such a big problem in democracies is that we are used to be free. We are used to express whatever we want. Everybody wants to speak. And at the beginning of the era of internet, we thought that that's great. That's a very big strength of this revolution, right? But that ended up in having now an internet which is closer and closer to a river who is really polluted. It's deeply polluted. And now, that's about the classical media. I see a very strong light for the opportunity for the classical media, and not only for the media, but also for the think tanks, which I represent, for all sources of reliable information, because people already, and in the future definitely more and more, will not be able to recognize what is really a reliable piece of information, what is disinformation, and what is misinformation. We are already having a problem in distinguishing this. Also because we add to this. Just look at yourself. Just tell yourself how many times you forwarded something you maybe weren't so much sure about if it's true or not. How many times you were shocked by the news, but you thought it's true, but it was not. So we are all affected. So I think number one issue is that in democracies, we have to keep democracy going, but we have to also understand that good time is over. We are living in the era of, big powers coming back. It's not only Russia, China. Now we even have questions concerning America. What kind of leadership this will bring? So in such era, we have to be a little bit more careful. What we say, what we put on the internet, in what way we really misinform maybe the others without even knowing that. That's number one. And that's a big challenge for the societies who are so used to the freedom. And this is, by the way, a big challenge also for the media. Because what I see as an expert, and that's also a tricky part, that media wants to comment on everything. While when we have a war in Ukraine, you can't. You have to be really careful what you say. Because if you give too much of information, you can enter into a sphere which doesn't really help.
You can endanger the troops.
Yeah, situation
soldiers,
worse.
yes.
So it is a lot to do with our own brain and our own internal, red lights to ourselves.
Małgorzata, excuse me. I have to jump in because you're talking about journalistic integrity and responsibility, but also every user of the internet responsibility. But I wanted to ask a politician perspective. What can be done in a sense of regulation to ensure that we are safe and we are not manipulated by algorithms, but at the same time, we preserve freedom of speech?
Thanks a lot. I mean, this is Davos, so we also have to disagree a little bit sometimes. And I don't buy in to an alarmist approach to tech and social media, that social media has only limited women. I don't think that is true, and I study social media every day because I am co-chairing Meta's Oversight board, so I see a lot of cases and a lot of content moderation decisions. And what I'm seeing in a general way is that in the old days, news and everything we read everywhere was fed to us from that small, smoke-filled editorial rooms dominated by men, where women had very little chance of getting a voice. If you look at social media now, you have content creators who are building their careers on social media. You have women who are speaking up for their rights. You have women who are speaking up against domestic violence. You have women insisting that they can talk about breast cancer on the internet. You have Iranian women coming together telling us their story via the internet. So the internet has done many things that has given women more voice, like it has given all of us more voice, but actually particularly women, because we had very little voice before. So that's one thing. At the same time, and I think it's so important we keep those two thoughts at the same time, it is also a risk that the internet and social media can be used to weaponize against women. And the way I'm seeing right now, there is a lot of, because old news is not so important anymore, influencers are very important, there's a masculine energy in the world right now, and I do think that that voice that we have taken over the last few years, that is what we have to fight for now. And we have to fight for an internet which is safe for women, of course, and where it's not weaponized. We have seen examples of AI that is weaponized against women. We have seen revenge porn or nude images that were not real, but where it could be extremely harmful and even dangerous for women. So we have to put in all those safeguards, but we cannot start from a position where we say, oh, women have completely lost out on social media. It's not true. And what we have to find out are some ways where we protect the free speech, and that's what you're asking, protect the free speech, but also make sure that there is a point where free speech meets other human rights. And those human rights could be that you are protected from harm, for example, that you are safe, And every day, this is what I do for Meta, I try to find that balance between free speech and other human rights. And that's what we have to do every day on the internet.
Thank you for that. You know, one wise woman said something similar to that you just mentioned. And she said, technology is like a knife. She used a metaphor of the knife. You can cut a bread and you can kill a person. So it's not technology. Technology itself is neutral. It's how people use it.
Yeah, and I'd like to add something to bring together these two comments, because I think it's really important. When we speak about disinformation, we often talk about responsible content creation and regulation. And I want to say something about both of those things. Responsible creation is only one side of the table. Responsible consumption, and I think you spoke about the forwarding, is so important. I'm in the business of cybersecurity. I want to keep people safe. I want to keep organizations safe online. It has as much to do with responsible consumption and responsible use as it does responsible creation. And I want to make sure that that's super clear, because we can very quickly make ourselves victims. And I think if we are to change the world, and women can change the world, it's also about the responsible use of information and the triangulation of sources to make sure that we feel comfortable. It used to be that fat pipe on the other end were the smoking Caucasian men, but that really was our only source of information. We have the ability to triangulate now. We have many sources of information coming to us, good, bad, and different. And so I think taking back the power for ourselves and being really responsible and thoughtful and deliberate in the way that we share information, it's critical. It's not only critical to stopping the flow of disinformation, but for our online safety, for our safety as humans, and for the safety of our children and those around us. So I just want to bring together that I think it's those two things coming together.
Thank you. Alex,
Yes,
closing remarks.
Well, Prime Minister, you mentioned this balance, and I totally agree, but I think the challenge is that we are just observing that we are losing this balance right now. And I have to say, I cannot understand, and I take a very negative view on the recent decision of Meta about withdrawing fact-checking, because this really put us on danger even deeper where we are today. Yes, because it's opened too much this unbalanced situation for social media, which again even further impact negative disinformation of social media, then again further into the traditional media. So this is a very dangerous situation, not only from the ethical point of view, not only from spreading this negative news, but also it's simply unfair competition. One simple thing, traditional media takes responsibility, ethical responsibility and legal responsibility for any misinformation that they spread, for every disinformation. If social media are not obliged to the same law, they basically have lower costs, they can have a higher reach and many competitive advantages, which is basically unfair, and put those companies which really try to rely on the fact-checking in much more difficult situations. So that's something which I would really like to ask, that politicians and decision makers has a strong obligation to make sure that this balance is kept. It was just lost.
Very quickly, because we are wrapping up in a minute.
Should I answer? Yeah. Yeah, no, I really want to, because everyone has heard these announcements about Meta changes, and I mean, I'm not speaking for Meta, let me be very clear about that. I'm speaking for the Oversight Board, but I want to try to explain what I think Meta's been saying. They're saying they want to change their fact-checking. They're not saying they don't want to have fact-checking in the future. So they're changing the system they have now, where they have fact-checkers that feed into Meta. The reason why they're changing that, as they say themselves, is because that their fact-checkers has been perceived as biased. I don't know anything about whether they were or not, but they've been perceived as biased. And if you have fact-checking, particularly in the US, I don't think it works to have fact-checkers who are not by half of the population and the new political administration seen as completely invalid. So what Meta's wanting to do now is to change to something like community notes that they have on X, It has to be better than community notes, also because it has to be scalable. But let's think about that model as a crowdsourced fact-checking system. This is a model we also know from other platforms. This is how Wikipedia operates, with a crowdsourced system. And perhaps we could have a community notes that was better than X and actually was more supported by a broader public. So I do think that could work, but I don't see Meta giving up fact-checking. They can't do that.
Thank you.
There's so many things out there. And the other thing I would like to add is that Meta will still do content moderation. They will still try to find that balance that I'm talking about between free speech and other human rights.
Małgorzata, last
Just
minute.
last word from my side. It's not only about big techs, and it's not only about consumers. Please don't forget, we will be having increasing number of cases where state actors, countries who are not friendly to us, won't disintegrate democratic societies. And this is a very big challenge for all of us, men, women, for all those who believe in freedom of speech, in democracy and all these values. We are not able to fight that just giving this to the governments or to the platforms or even to the media. We have to be very conscious that that's the situation. We are constantly disinformed, misinformed, and we ourselves have to contribute to being able to protect ourselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for taking time with World Women Davos. Rupal, thank you.